Thanks everyone for joining. My name is Andrew Sun from NVIDIA. I help lead our global business development for the retail and commerce industries. Welcome to this session. It's really great to see such a full room after lunch. And also it says a lot to be at a conference like AWS reInvent where there's just so many announcements about the latest data, compute, models, and at the same time, so many of you coming to join us to talk about something that is, frankly, as human as it gets, conversations. Voice AI is really evolving quickly. It's no longer just a simple command. Today, it's rich. It understands the context of a dialogue. It can understand your intent, your emotion, domain-specific language, and all of this is happening in real time. A lot of this breakthrough is happening because of infrastructure, with the cloud and AWS, with accelerated computing and GPUs, as well as foundation models, and all of this is becoming so much more tangible for every consumer and every enterprise. Such that the everyday tasks that we do, whether that's customer support, whether that's ordering your food, whether that's transcribing a medical note, this is all being rapidly transformed with voice. I'm excited about our panel today because we're going to explore where voice AI is today in the market. What does it really take to run a voice AI workload, not just in a pilot, but actually scale that into production? And you're going to be hearing stories from the people that are building these products. And they're building them at scale. They're tackling all the hard problems: latency, cost, privacy, safety, but ultimately trust of their customers and of their employees. So with that, thank you all for coming. And let's get started. I'd love to invite my panelists to please introduce themselves.
Cool. Hi, everyone. So my name is Sean, co-founder and CTO of Pod AI. So Pod AI is based in London. We do voice agent for enterprise contact centers. We work with some of the largest enterprise, in the world, and including utility companies, financial services, and a lot of hospitality and restaurants and hotels as well. So yeah, glad to be here, and love to share more with everyone here.
Hi. So I'm Cameron Davies. So I'm the Chief Data Officer for Yum Brands. So for those of you who don't know Yum Brands, we're the world's largest restaurant company. So you've probably heard of Pizza Hut, Taco Bell, KFC, or hopefully Habit Burger if you're on the West Coast, with about 65,000 units worldwide. So we're using voice in a number of places across the enterprise. We're happy to talk about it in a few minutes.
I think you got the most loyal customers in a developer conference. At least Taco Bell, certainly more.
I'm Prem. I'm a machine learning engineer and the founding engineer of Heidi Health. Heidi is an AI care partner. We do voice-based clinical documentation and workflow automation for clinicians. So clinicians can spend less time taking notes and more time on the patients. We're based out of Melbourne, Australia, and we launched this product a couple of years ago, and we scaled to supporting like thousands of users worldwide. I'm really looking forward to chat, and good to meet all of you.
Excellent. Well, thanks for joining us today. We're so excited to have this diverse point of view here on this panel for everyone. Let's jump right in. I think in so many times when we're going through a technology paradigm shift, there's always sort of a sprinkling of 1,000 seeds to kind of see what blooms. But ultimately, what we're really here for is solving real customer problems and pain points. So let's jump right in. Could each of you share a real-world example of where voice AI is transforming a core business process from your vantage point?
Yeah, we deploy a lot of voice agent for different verticals and many of our customers. So it's kind of quite hard for me to actually pick one specific case. I will pick one anyway. So because we just had a Black Friday, right? So we actually work with one of our retail customers here in the US. We started with launching a voice agent with them first because our primary drive is always driving for voice first, and that's kind of our product for the focus since the company was funded. The customer already work with a chat vendor as well, so they do like online chat, which is actually a very common thing. That on Black Friday they got a lot of traffic. They also got a lot of surge of traffic during Black Friday. It's about 3x of their normal volume during that week, and typically what they have to do is that they need to staff 3x of the existing contact center people in order to take and digest those volumes. But the problem of that is that they have to staff, started hiring a couple of months ago, and then it's always a temporary job because after Black Friday, they are going to scale back the operation. So the training, the hiring, and afterwards letting people go is a very expensive process overall. They started with chat and then they wanted to do voice, but voice is hard, so they partnered with us to launch the voice agent. And once we launched the voice agent, you would thought that the business will start to let people go and they reduce workforce. The reality is that they just don't have to handle these kind of seasonalities. They keep their workforce around because there are so many things to do in the contact center anyway. If they are not picking up a call, they can totally do something else. So I think we always thought that AI would take people's job away. It's probably going to be true. We talked a little bit already. But what we are seeing now with a lot of our customer base, it just smooths that demand curve and make it a lot easier for them to manage operationally. This last week, we took over their chat deployments as well. So now we are like the omni-channel vendor for them. So the customer can actually get in touch with the business online chat, order something, and then phone in, and then we would know who they are and when they place the order. So I think that to me is a very cool and interesting case study there.
That's a great one, and I feel like we've heard that at least in the retail industry a lot, in the sense that the expectation versus what actually happens is that the cognitive load on these very retail demanding or business operations where the operations are so intense and they spike, no one in that industry ever feels like they have enough hours in the day just to do their job. And so you actually shift that cognitive load, and a lot of the times you're hearing customers being able to actually serve customers, right, and focus on the actual connection with their end user. Cam, what are you seeing in your business?
Yeah, I think our most impactful is the one we've been the most vocal about and most public with. We're looking at voice AI right now in two ways, which one is in the drive-through, and the other is in call centers, and we've got other applications that we haven't really talked about publicly. Those are the two big ones. In the drive-through, we are live with a voice solution in over 600 Taco Bells sitting here today, running live. It's been a journey of learning. What we found is really interesting. We talk about cutting labor. That really isn't our key premise off of it. It goes back to what you use a term, we use that term, which is the cognitive load, which is if you've ever, I don't know, anybody work fast food ever in their teenage career, a couple of people. If you want stress, put on a headset, go sit at a cash register at a busy Taco Bell that's running, let's call it 4 or 5 million AUVs, which is a pretty good size for a Taco Bell, and during a lunch rush, and try to take an order, cash out an order, fill a drink, grab a bag, make sure it's right, get it to a customer. They're all really friendly and happy, and everybody's rational, right? It's tough, right? It is tough, and it takes a set of mental toughness to go do it. So our thoughts are, if you do this, what we can do is we can take that cognitive load off. We can make it easier for these team members to do their jobs. And in our experiment so far, I call it an experiment, we're scaled at 600 stores. Now that's 600 out of 60,000 across the globe, but still. What we're finding is really interesting, which is if you get it right, it can do the job pretty well. And in some of our best stores, it can be successful somewhere from 70 to 80% of the time, that it just takes the order from start to finish. And so it can do, and it's just getting better. We're finding that consumers are getting more used to dealing with it as it's getting better. In the restaurant, we see a couple of interesting things on a direct value perspective. It never forgets to upsell. It never forgets to ask about roundup. And so you see some financial advantages there for your franchisees. And then for the team members, what we see in restaurants that use it and leave it on, we see dramatic decreases in turnover, which is our keyest KPI to say, are we making it better to do this job?
Right.
And then if you're a franchisee and you understand how much it takes to go hire a new person and train them, that's a pretty big financial incentive as well.
That's great.
For Heidi, I feel like voice AI is like the core of how we operate. You must have all noticed that when you go see a GP in a clinic, you walk in, and then you see your GP sitting in front of a computer, ready to take notes. You sit on your bed, the GP is asking like, hey, how's your, let's just say you have a chest pain. The GP is like, hey, how's your chest pain? How do you rate the pain? And every now and then, the GP shifts between you and the computer, just taking notes, making sure that they're getting everything that you said into the computer. And that just sort of makes you feel like GP is focusing more on the computer than on you. And like there's a chance that the GPs could be missing out on real details of what you're saying. And what Heidi does is Heidi uses voice AI to automate all of that. So the GP gets like full time to spend on you. Like you just have like this ambient scribe in the background, just listening on the conversation. Just make sure that it picks up on everything that you're saying. So the doctors put the full attention on you. And also I feel like with what Heidi does is the benefit is twofold. One is that it makes sure that GPs get to spend more time on you. They hear what you're saying, making sure that they don't miss out on any information that you say so that everything's accurate and you don't have to really think about them losing on anything. And the second thing is GPs don't have to spend a lot of time after their usual operating hours, making sure that they get all the admin work and everything done. So it's sort of like it takes a lot of cognitive load away from the GPs and also make sure that GPs free up their time to spend more time with the patients.
Prem, you used a really interesting word there about ambient, right? Like that it's constantly there. Talk to us more about kind of what you're seeing there in terms of user adoption and engagement.
So sometimes what we feel more about technology is that it kind of like hinders the way we do our everyday things. You have a phone, you have a laptop, you also have to spend a lot of time interacting with it. You're typing things into it. You have to take your time away from your normal activities to do things. But with voice AI, you can make the technology not feel that pervasive. It's more like a thing that's in the background, listening or doing whatever you want it to do. Like it's like a way for you to interact with the platform without actually having to spend a lot of time away from your day-to-day activities. Like for Scribe, it's just something that's listening in the background, making sure that it takes a lot of the manual labor away, and also it captures the conversation and makes it into a structured way when you connect to an LLM as well. So it's like a really good way for you to interact with the system without actually having to take too much time away.
Yeah, thanks for that. I think in many ways that's sort of the future, right? As this technology only gets more personal, more fast, more relevant for the user, that ambience and how you interact with it becomes so conversational. It's like we all have an assistant with us at all times, which then kind of begs the question of how do you scale this technology, right? If everyone starts to form the new habit and it really starts to adopt and scale, what are some of those technical considerations that really need to come to mind if you are building this or partnering this for your enterprise? So let's talk about the technology side. Sean, maybe you can start us off here with, what are you seeing as the hardest technical challenge when it comes to scaling a voice AI solution from a pilot into a production?
Yeah, yeah. I think for after ChatGPT got launched, I think the world became a very different place because Poly existed before that time. I think the LM actually make building of these agents a lot faster and easier. However, you would see that once you try to get it to production, you run into a lot of challenges. And I think I usually like to say is like, this technology get you to 70-80% really fast. Basically like a couple of hours of work, you will be there. And you thought that you have already reached that level of productionness. And once you get into production, you realize there are so many different problems, the hallucinations, like the instruction for the following capabilities. These are all getting better as well. But when we bring in voice, there's an additional layer of complexity. Is like, about the speech recognition errors. Is that, if the TTS sound robotic, the user would not be engaging. And you started to solve the whole business problem. Like, I think the technical problem is one layer, but then there's another layer on top of it is like the adoption problem. Is like, hey, adoption in my thinking is that you need 3 personas to actually buy into this. One is the enterprise, the business you sell to. They need to feel that they are getting ROI from the solution, right? So that ROI calculation is very important. The second layer is the consumers. Like eventually the voice agent is going to talk to your customer. Like, does the customer like to talk to the voice agent? Unfortunately, in this country, the answer is no, because you have tried out a lot of these like an automatic phone systems, which is still predominantly the majority of the install base. They are not very good. And so therefore, that when people who realize this is actually an AI, they immediately wanted to hang up on the phone call. That's like working in contact center, one of the major issues we are seeing. So the user experience of the first turn is very important. You gotta understand very accurately. You gotta say in a very crispy way that people feel like, oh, this agent actually sound very different from the previous ones I interact with. So that's a tricky one. I think the third one about scaling is about prosumer adoption. Like now you heard AI industry, a lot of people doing forward deploy engineering. It's just because the prosumer adoption is not quite there. Enterprise, a lot of them don't know how to adopt this technology and build effective, product around it. So therefore, a lot of startups come in to actually do a lot of these forward deploy methods to actually go really deep into the organization. So this is the problem I think that everyone is trying to solve right now, all the big cloud vendors as well, because I think that's the final piece of the question. Because I think ROI, we can narrow it down. The consumer side, you can also narrow it down as well with a forward deployment model. But the prosumer, real challenging. I think, but the prosumer adoption would gradually improve as technology become better. And then we need to create more product layers on top of these foundational models to actually much more easier to learn and interact with.
That's super helpful. I think that gap in closing that last 20%, right, is so fundamental. How do you think about what to prioritize first, when you're trying to close that gap, right? We definitely, hear companies talking about speed, right, is really important so that there's not just a very uncomfortable lag in the conversation where it's just, to your point, a very inhuman interaction. But then at the same time, there's probably issues like accuracy, right, at the end of the day. Like, talk to us a little bit about, from an engineering perspective, how you think about prioritization of closing that gap.
Yeah, it's a very, very good question. It's a tough problem. I think one company alone cannot solve those problems. That's why we partner with NVIDIA to actually solve some of the problems. Like, latency, we shouldn't worry about it because, NVIDIA should have the best GPUs and best software knows how to run on those GPUs to solve that problem for us. So that is just like, something that we decided to take that, bet on partnering with NVIDIA. And I think accuracy is about collecting the data and then continue to improve your model. So I think that continuous improvement actually matters a lot. But there's also fundamentally the model that you are using. Does it actually, is it sufficient for your problems? Like, one very interesting use case is we have this outbound call where the human picking up a call, when the agent make an outbound, human pick up a call, accuracy was perfect. But then once there's a robotic IVR pick up the call, the accuracy just complete poor. It's just because the model didn't see this kind of data before. So therefore, I think that the approach we are taking is that we decided which areas we wanted to partner so that we remove those out of our priorities. Then the second piece would be, building a very flexible infrastructure. Because the good thing is that everyone is trying to solve the problem for you because AI is making so much advancements in the past year, so many companies working on it. So you kind of need to have a flexible infrastructure ready to take on all these new technology. So I think the second way we are doing is just building a very flexible platform so you can integrate it with the latest technology when they are available.
Got it. Flexibility and option value. Because you said it so well. The ecosystem is just proliferating at a very incredible rate, right? And what you think is not available today, it sometimes is a matter of just weeks, right? It's no longer months, given how fast the market's going.
And riff off that for a minute, if it's okay.
Please.
A non-engineering perspective off of it, which is fine. There's nothing wrong. It's a good perspective. The way we think about it is there's a set of basics, right? A latency of 4 seconds is not going to be acceptable. So there's a set of basics. There's a set of accuracy you've got to at least be at. Right? There's a set of infrastructure things that have to be true and cost structures that have to be true. Those are minimum hurdles. Which one am I going to prioritize? They all need to be true, right? All three of these things, there's a minimum level, and you need to decide what those minimum levels of things to be true. There's no prioritization there. They all just have to be true. But you need to understand what that is and decide what that is for your use case, right? Once I have that, then it starts to be, and this is where like maybe I'm just the product of 20 years at Disney and my experience is there, then it starts to be about the experience. To your point, like, because it doesn't matter how accurate it is if it sucks, right? So do I give you 2 more points of accuracy or 5 more points of accuracy, but it's a really bad experience because the latency sucks or the voice doesn't sound right or is off-putting. So I'm a firm believer that once you hit the minimum levels, your number one priority needs to be that experience for that use case. Because, as I said, like we've been there. The reason why I think people are still where they are is because they're so used to like how quickly can I hit 0? Because I'm used to the NLPs. They're really bad. They can only answer the questions they've been trained on, which is 20 questions in a chat bot. And they can't do anything but those 5 things. It's just frustrating to just let me talk to a person. So in my world, we're still stuck in sort of Apple Newton world of like my experience is this. We're really moving toward iPhone world, but nobody's tried it enough yet, and we're not all there yet. And unless we get enough people in that space, we're going to have a hard time moving people along that continuum. Just my perspective.
Oh, that's super helpful, Cam, because I think in many ways what I'm hearing from you is customer trust at the end of the day is everything. And so there's a minimum set of sacred sort of standards, right, for your brand to make sure, in order to play this game, it's important to provide. Awesome. Prem, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I agree with what Cameron said on that. So just to get an engineering perspective on that, like especially when it comes to models, like you always look at models in silos, like how well the models perform in terms of like accuracy or precision or whatever. But you also have to look at it from an end-to-end perspective as well. If you need to look at how the whole customer experience is, like you put the model in, okay, it's got good performance, but at the end of the day, like when you go through a whole customer journey, does the model really help the user achieve what they want to achieve, and the performance, like, and the experience they get out of it, like that's really really important to how it's like when you're using like agents like voice AI.
Yeah, I mean, in your world, but the whole point is, in medical world, I talk to the client and I got to remember, and I'm spending over half my time actually just charting.
Yeah.
Versus dealing with care, and that's frustrating if you're in the medical. So you're trying to deal with the fact that like I can take the thing about your job you really don't like, but it's necessary.
Yeah.
Move it up in that experience chain, and I can spend more time. But if at the end of the day I go back and check, and all those things are inaccurate,
yeah,
that actually made it worse.
Exactly.
I would have been better off just to do it myself.
That would just double your time, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. And also, like, doctors didn't spend 5 years in medical school just to, like, sit in front of a computer and take notes. They want to be a doctor. And Hayden really does that really well. And voice AI is, like, it really enables that to, like, take it from a point where the doctors don't have to worry too much about what they're saying. But if the model is not really that accurate, then that actually means that it creates a ripple down the line. The notes are really bad, and the coding and billing, everything, you can't really trust that anymore.
Yeah.
Thanks, gentlemen. Let's switch to another topic here on scaling, related to scaling, which is, we're here at AWS reInvent. I think Amazon in many ways deserves so much credit because they pioneered far-field communication with Alexa and Echo and really took the industry in a new direction. When it comes to voice AI, how are you seeing AI manage kind of nuances specific to voice? Whether that's like a regional accent, whether that's noise in the background. You all kind of have a unique perspective given from where you sit. So would love to hear, how you're seeing AI manage some of that auditory complexity and nuance.
Yeah, I think from a very technical point of view, and then after seeing several technology iterations in the past, is that you have a lot of these local or regional issues, really, accent of the particular kind, or particular kind of understanding problems. I remember in the past, Nuance used to focus a lot on healthcare space, specifically tailor vocabulary for those use cases, right? But if you see the technology evolution, especially in machine learning world, it's becoming a more from a cascaded system to be a more completely connected large neural networks. I think when I was thinking about where to invest in and then where to solve the problem, is it's very important to remember that the technology will eventually move there. And I think LM, I remember when we did chatbots, is about intent, language understanding, and you have some decision makings, and you're writing some template text, and then it's a cascaded pipeline. But then now is a complete end-to-end training. We have now the speech-to-speech models as well. It's try to join all these modalities together. To be frank, I don't think the technology quite there yet, but I do actually think that this is definitely the future. And so if the technology is going to evolve that way, and you do actually have a problem to solve right now, then you just need to solve the problem. If you can solve it in a nice way, great. But if that problem is only OpenAI can solve the problem, then solve the problem, right? Like you can patch around that problem right now so that you can have a production system that's kind of ready to use. Because what you want now is what you want to ship the product now rather than ship the product several years later once the technology becomes there. But you always need to keep in mind that technology would eventually catch up. So how do you build up infrastructure or architecture that factor that in the future? I think it's quite important. And I think this is like quite, because internally 6 months ago, we have this like review of like, do we continue to invest in cascaded systems or end-to-end systems? Mm-hmm. And then we did a lot of testing within ourselves and also with the clients. The conclusion is always like, in the future, an end-to-end system will be the future.
I mean, the technology will continue to change. I'd say the first thing is we should continue to reset the expectation of what the standard is. And what I mean by that is every time we try to do something with AI, we could talk about it, like one of my head of AI is in the back of the room with forecasting, and they're like, well, is it 100%? Like, well, you're not 100%. Right?
Close.
So
Pretty
like
close.
the standard should be like, what is the standard? And right now when we talk about accents, like, has anybody in this room ever had a conversation with someone who had an accent that was different from theirs and you had to ask them to repeat something? Right. Of course you have. Yeah. Right? Of course you have. So like the expectation isn't that the AI will perfectly hear every accent perfectly and respond to it. The standard should be how does it adjust when it doesn't? Right? With that technology, and where do we tune it to specific places to make sure those things that we know? And we have we have a joke right now. One of our heads on the product side went to Oxford, and he's got a very proper English accent. Our current voice ordering hates Guillen's accent. It's hilarious. Everybody else will test it. It'll get 80, 90%. And Guillen will test it. It'll get to 50%. He'll yell at thing. He'll call me this thing is shit. I can't believe we're doing this thing. And it's Guillen's accent. So we could tune it to him. Yeah. But unfortunately, across the U.S., that's not the standardized accent that we're going after now. When we release in the U.K., we probably will. Yeah. But so and then the others, the voice canceling, the noise canceling, all that stuff will come along. But I think setting the expectation right is the first thing that people tend to set it the wrong way.
Yeah, and then fine-tuning it for bullocks.
Well, the thing is that I completely agree with you, and then we are expecting AI to be better than human, which is fair because there's a lot of news. People go on the news and then say that AGI is arriving. Mm-hmm. The reality is, I think the expectation has been set way too high. Yeah. So yeah.
Prem, any thoughts on kind of how you think about your decisions of cascading versus composable, right? This whole idea is really, whether it's the business or the technical side, of how do you think about the architecture in a world where you know where the world's going? Like, how do you think about it?
Yeah, I think Sean kind of mentioned it by making the platform flexible. And especially where you are, when you're a startup, you're really experimenting different things. You don't know what works, and you want to make sure that you're really set in a way you can quickly adapt to change. So if you're using a composable architecture, it really helps with enabling something like that. So when using composable architecture, you're just making the components really modular. So it makes it it's hot swappable. You can, for example, if you look at Heidi, there's transcription, there's a node generation part, there's billing. And the way we set it up, we make sure that each part is really replaceable with something new. And given the way things operate, even if, for example, if you're using an agent-driven architecture, where you have LLMs interacting with each other, there's a lot of models coming around all the time. There's different kind of tools coming around all the time. So you need to make sure that your platform is flexible enough to iterate and change based on what was coming out, so that you have the flexibility to change. But on the other hand, cascading is really efficient when you're working in a place where you know exactly what the system needs to be. Once you ironed out how you want a certain feature to be, then you can just, like, okay, this is the maximum we're gonna go. Okay, then at that point we fix certain things and then we set it up, okay, one thing after the other, this is how the flow goes. And also really helpful when you want like monitoring and different things enabled, and also like it will be very fault tolerant as well. Because one of the downsides of having a flexible architecture is that it's really hard to know, like when things go wrong, you have to like, it makes it a bit hard to debug when you like, there's a lot of moving parts around, but at the same time, it's a price you have to pay to stay flexible.
Yeah, look, I think it's a great question. It's one we constantly ask ourselves. I've been married to the same woman for 35 years. I have no fear of commitment. I'm not worried about that. What I am worried about is I've never had those same kind of feelings for any kind of technology vendor I've ever met, right? So finding that balance is key. And is what we just said, like, there's pieces of it I'm just gonna need to commit to, because I don't know. And that commitment will create a set of stability, recurrence, trainability on my team, and an expectation, realizing that I may be behind. And then there's pieces that I know we need to be composable on. And so we're constantly reinventing the architecture. By the way, but you know, we just had this conversation. It's not just on the technology side. We had a whole conversation last night about our entire data infrastructure. And our current set of schemas and the way we've done it, like, you know what? It was really great for a set of reporting and analytics that we were doing. It's not set up the way we need it to be set up to feed some of our upcoming like LLMs and some of the more generative AI. So how do we do that, right? And how do we flex it? I don't regret the money we put in 5 years ago to get a great star schema to do what we needed to do, right? I'm not, that's fine, right? And I have no problem with the fact that we need to now reinvest and adjust. But there are certain elements of models, for example, we were talking about changing out models. Like some of them will get better, some of them won't. And so where I know the composability will be key, how do I architect around that to balance the trade-offs?
Super insightful. Given we have a kind of different perspective, both on the enterprise side as the ISV side, kind of different stages of maturity in terms of your organizations. Talk to us about how do you or your customers make that decision of what to build when it comes to voice in-house versus partnering?
I guess I'm the one non-vendor on the stage. So, but you guys, I love your perspective. I can say for us, we have a sort of a standardized filter that starts with like IP. Like, is there something we know that we want to keep to us, or something we know that somebody else doesn't, or is there something they know that we don't have and it would be a huge speed to market? I'll use a non-voice example on, we use a third party to do email customization. And when we looked at the way they were doing it, you know, Rocky and I set aside like, yeah, we could probably figure this out over time. It'd probably take us about 18 months of research to do it. And at that time, the opportunity cost is gone. Let's just sign the contract and go, right? Because the IP was already there. And then it's about cost and speed to market, right? And then the third thing for us is integration. Not only are we the world's largest restaurant company, but we are quickly becoming the world's largest restaurant technology company with Byte. And so there is a lock-in of integration with our technology that we also care about is that we've added as a fourth filter.
That's such a critical point. I think so many times in paradigm shifts, people race for speed, right? And speed is important in a market. It's important to learn and rapidly learn. But there's always this fundamental strategy question that we see often at the C-level around who owns this intelligence, right? And what is truly sacred? And that's a really thoughtful decision and an important one to kind of navigate your approach on.
And that's like, more than ever, we'll go back to the voice. Like, no matter what, we own those recordings and we own that data. Right? Like, no matter what. And all the customer data, no matter what, we own it. We even own it with our third-party aggregators, by the way. So like we're serious about that, and that's a key point for us.
Yeah, I think with Byte especially, and the investments that Yum has made, I think it was like $1 billion to date, right? And in terms of how much they've put in, the talent, you can see that it's not just sort of a vocal strategy, right? Like there's real technology, there's real talent there. Sean, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I think in this, so voice agent itself has a really complicated, like modules and technical stack. In order to actually make the voice agent works, not just for one use cases, but for many, many use cases, like, because that's the industry we are in, right? Because it's not just about building a retail use case or financial services. We have to actually sell into a lot of different customers as well. So in order to do that, the things that we have to build is actually a lot. And so then, deciding what you do and what you not to do become very important. And I think this is always the biggest question for startup. It's like, what's your core value add, and what do you focus on predominantly, because you have limited resources. To us, it's always about delivering that voice agent experiences, and we are focusing on building up the application for the end customers, either for the consumer or enterprises. So with that in mind, we have been focusing on building the product layer to make it easily configurable for different industries and different purpose, different use cases that they're looking for. So that has been quite fundamental. We also find ourselves, because our goal is to deliver the best user experience as much as possible, because we see that from our conversation with customers, that's the reason they come to put the Pod AI at the first place. So we will have to invest in areas we think that is needed. That's the reason we started to invest our own speech recognition model, because we previously found that some of the off-the-shelf speech APIs works perfectly, but for some use cases, you started to see there are limitations there. And without controlling that particular technical stack, you kind of limited by what you can do to deliver that best experience. And, in the old days, speech recognition model is just such a big problem, because it's not an end-to-end model yet. It's like you have this language model, acoustic model, and then, you have a vocabulary, all these things that need to be, again, a pipeline system. So we have always hesitated to invest in that until we realized, NVIDIA started to do their own models and streamline the entire pipeline. And we just say, okay, well, let's take that base model, and then we train our own model, train our own data and tailor to it. And it solved so many of the problems that we would not be able to solve previously. So I guess what I'm trying to use this example to say is that only model is not a goal, is not a strategy, but be able to deliver a best user experience for our clients is the goal. But then the goal takes us to actually invest in this particular area. So I think you always need to find what is your North Star that you are trying to achieve. Say no to majority of things, and then realize, this is like one thing or two I have to invest in.
Great. Prem, anything you want to add to this?
I think Cameron and Sean, they covered pretty much everything I wanted to say, but it's more about just what your business is, how much you want to outsource. It's like when you're starting off, you want to make sure you get your product to users first. And what's the best way to do it? Like if it's something that's business critical, you want to make sure that you develop that in-house. But if it's something that can be outsourced, if there's like an API or provider you can use, you use that. And it's also you have limited resources, so you prioritize, like where do I invest my resources now? Is it something that I can figure out down the line? Okay, cool, I'll just use a third party, get it over with, and then figure it out later. But if it's really critical to the business, okay, I'm gonna spend my resource to research and development and get it up and running and just serve my users. It's just about how you prioritize your resources.
Great. So moving on in terms of enabling this technology, clearly the ecosystem matters. There's so many different players that are critical. What do you think are the most critical ingredients for a business leader to look for when they are trying to decide on a voice AI platform?
I'll say from our perspective, we've already hit on a couple of them. For us, it's first, and personally, is it somebody we want to work with? You say that, but we've all had people that we've worked with vendors in the past, and I just would prefer never to work with those people ever again. And then there's people we worked with, you still have relationships with today because they were just really good and easy to work with. You can come to win-wins. And so for us, that's the number one thing we meet. So is this somebody that's on the same page as us? Do they want to work with? Then it starts to be about the technology piece of it. And sometimes I don't want the most cutting edge. Sometimes I want the one that's going to integrate with my my technology the easiest, the people that are going to work with my people the easiest, and then there's a minimum set. And then it becomes to that lock, right, where we talked about commitment, right? How composable is the system? Can you work with my other things? Are you going to, do I have to do the integrations? Do you have, because we die on the integration hill all the time, right? We all see it. We die on the integration hill. So what's already there, what am I going to pay for? What are you going to pay for? And then that composability, right? And the firm belief that if you have to lock me in so hard that I have no optionality, then you obviously don't believe that strongly in your product. That's my theory. If you believe in your product, you're not going to have to lock me in that hard because it's going to be so good I'm never going to want to leave it. And you need to put the faith in the product.
That's a great point. And it kind of segues nicely in terms of this decision that a lot of businesses have to come up with of when to use open source versus when to use a more proprietary model. Curious if gentlemen can talk a little bit about that decision framework for your company or in customers that you've seen.
Yeah, I would say from my perspective, always start with the easiest to start with, because you wanted to first prove that this technology brings you ROI. You wanted to prove that this technology is actually helping your business in the way that you want them to. And so I think that invest too early on in the open source is probably not the right strategy. I think that you should give it a try on the latest closed, those APIs, the easiest you can integrate it to. Try to build something with your workflow, and if that works well, and you prove that there's a ROI, and you realize it's not sufficient, and then open source can actually solve that problem for you, then you should go that way. That's how we did with our ASR models. That's how we did with our in-house ALM models as well. It's only, when ChatGPT came along, we just threw all the APIs, to them, just try to iterate on the product faster. And then over time, you realize, there are problems with this and that, and you don't want it to be bounded by a particular roadmap of a company. Then that's where I think that investing in your own model would actually make sense. But I think it needs to be a very deliberate calculation, because you don't want it to invest in technology that you don't actually need eventually.
Yeah, it's the same. I'm a firm believer in open source. I believe most of the things that's built on technology or software, it's all built on open source. But having said that, I agree with what Sean said. When you're entering a market, you're trying to prove a concept, and your resources are limited. You want to invest too much in open source, and also the quality of the open source models is not up to par with the foundation models yet. I feel like it might take maybe 2 or 3 iterations of open source model to catch up to all the foundation ones. But you want to prove a concept, so the fastest way is you use one of the APIs or wrappers and make sure that you get, okay, I've got a product that works, and I've got enough customer bases, I've got enough resources, and now, okay, it's time to invest into an open source or invest in my own department and start R&D. And once you get that point, and there's a lot you can do, you have the flexibility, because a lot of the reasons why people move away from foundation or frontier models from different providers and calls is everything's behind an API. You don't know what's happening there, everything is abstracted away from an API. But you get to a point where you want to own a lot of those components, different things, how you want to do it. And then once you attain a certain point, you'll be tired of just having to call random API. To get one thing done, you might have to call 3 different APIs. When you can just get some open source models, host them yourself, and do a much better job than they can do. Because what these foundation models, what they do is they give you a generic use case, but based on your business needs, it might be a bit different, but they may not be flexible enough to integrate that into your future. And then you get to a point where, okay, this is where I start investing in my own R&D and get my product to a place where these services can no longer support me.
Right. Kim, you mentioned earlier a lot of the business outcomes you're seeing and the measurement of it. I'm curious if other folks on the panel can talk a little bit about tangible business outcomes and potentially, to the extent you can share business measurement that you're seeing out of your customers, right, in terms of impacts to their business when it comes to integrating voice, obviously.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that again? Sorry.
Yeah, just in terms of, are there any examples of business outcomes from integrating voice that you're seeing in health, for example.
Yep.
And similarly, Sean, you serve multiple industries. Talk to us a little bit about that.
In terms of health, like one thing we've noticed that clinicians are very hesitant to change. Like when you're trying to introduce a new software, they will rather, even if it's very helpful, they'd rather stick to whatever they have up and running because they're not that tech savvy like an engineers would be. And they have something that's set out and that works and they don't want to break it. And what we've observed that when you have a software that's built on top of voice, it kind of makes it easier for clinicians to interact with your product. Like they don't even have to know it's there, It's just something that's running in the background. No one's gonna notice it's there, Like you only know it when you interact with it. Like you start recording and then you stop recording. That's pretty much all you have to do. And also the downstream tasks as well. Like you can automate a lot of that as well, like the billing and medical coding and integrations and things like that. Like what the beauty of Heidi is it has integration with a lot of EHRs, so that notes are not just sitting there in a standalone software or something. Like once you've done a consultation, we have the notes and then it moves into an EHR, it's just there ready to go. And you can also take care of your downstream workflows as well. And all of that is being made possible with voice AI. So like, I feel like there's a big wave of change coming and voice AI is going to play a big role in it.
Sean, anything in terms of your cross-industry view around business?
Yeah, so I think it's very interesting that because when we started working on the contact center industry overall, we thought that cost is the primary thing, and then a lot of people thought that we're just trying to use AI to replace humans, and we see a lot. The reality is that once you deploy this voice agent in various different industries, you kind of started to realize that different industries actually care about different things. And they are seeking ROIs in different ways. So in the retail example I just mentioned is about smooth that demand curve. So then, they can actually, they don't have to overhire that many people and train them up and then let them go later. So that workforce management is a very important piece to them. That's for retail because they have seasonality. For restaurants we work with, they actually, we do a lot of reservations and bookings for them. And it's actually very funny that on average, in restaurants, actually mixing about 20% to 30% of their calls because just about the cognitive load that is happening inside a restaurant. People running around, especially at the peak hours, to actually pick up the call. And then, sometimes if there's availability 1 hour later, they don't even negotiate that availability. So the covers will not fill, for example. So, and then we just found that, restaurants, we usually find that they are, for large enterprises, they found the value in not just about the cognitive load, but also be able to pick up some of those revenues as well. So I think we are, helping them to increase from maybe at 4%, 5% of the revenue once deploy the voice agent, which is the kind of ROI we would not expect to begin with, right? So I think there are a lot of these different aspects. I think different industries are different. So you kind of have to deploy something and then learn with the clients on that journey.
Yeah, that's the retail examples. It hits home, obviously, just because to your point, the expectation versus the discovery was quite opposite, right? Yeah. And in retail, customer service, typically, especially as things move more digitally, you have last mile shipping costs. Yes. And then when you can serve a customer well, you avoid the additional last mile shipping cost, right? That recovery cost. And so when you serve your customers well, it can improve not only customer lifetime value, but the actual order economics.
Correct, right? Yeah, exactly.
We're seeing, it's interesting that because you imagine a world where right now you call and you're put on hold to deal with something because the IVR can't handle what you need it to do. And you have a choice, like stay on hold for 45 minutes, give me your number and I'll call you back. I think we're moving toward a third option, which is, or just talk to the virtual agent, which most of us like, well, if it can handle it, like, why wouldn't I of those three options? And then what you see is in the restaurant use case on the reservations, and I've talked to a lot of like folks in our space. We don't do that, obviously, but like the ones that do, that idea of like nobody's ever on hold. Somebody's always gonna pick up the phone. And so what that does to their top line demand driver, like it was there, but they were, in revenue management world, we called it an enable. Like you lost the business, you had no idea you lost the business because of availability or nobody picked up the call, right? And so as that goes away, I think it's gonna be an interesting, in your world, as that business case continues to flow. because it's a very, I'm booking a reservation for this time,
Yeah.
right? It's very clean, it's very contained, and yet somebody can, I'd rather do that than not.
That's a great example, Cam, and we see that in voice adjacent with vision, like in retail. Often, retail companies will come in and they'll start using computer vision to detect and automate and smooth out self-checkout at a store. And as they can use more accelerated computing, they realize that there's a lot more workloads that they can actually run on that same GPU. And so the detection of the use case they didn't even realize they had, right? It's suddenly they're looking at movement patterns of their customers and how long they're waiting in line, not just at checkout, but at the deli. And so this is a great example is Coles in Australia realized if customers wait more than 45 seconds at a deli, then they're gonna leave that line. And so now they can actually perceive it, understand it, alert the customers, and it's incremental revenue. Right?
Yeah, and we're talking voice, but like Lowe's isn't here, but we all know those folks. And the way they're starting to do it, the old, I don't see it in your bag, right? The old way that's just a terrible experience. Yeah. Now the computer vision is watching what comes out of the cart and goes into the bag. It's like, hey, I think you may have missed something. Right. Like I counted 14 items. It's less intrusive, right? And it's a lot smoother, but what it's doing for them on shrinkage is really interesting.
Yeah. It's all about reducing the friction and making it really convenient. All right, let's kind of move to kind of the final group of questions here, which is really about guidance. You all are unique leaders in your respective industries. For an organization that's just starting in voice AI, what's the top lesson or lessons that you wish you had known from the outset?
I'd say that if I was going to give anybody advice on this, and this is just not just voice, this is anything, one of the hardest things to do is know when to let go. We talk about failing fast. I was like, no, you need to fail cheap. Because if you fail fast and expensive, that's still not good. You need to fail cheap. But one of the things, and if I go back the last 5 years at Yum, just use that as an example, I can name 6 things right now that we have now stopped doing. Right? We tried it, it didn't work. And every one of those projects had somebody who was really passionate about it, that really believed in it. And if we just gave it another try, we could make it work, right? And one of the hardest things to do is saying, you know what? This isn't working, it's not worth the effort right now, or maybe the time's not right, maybe the technology's not there, and I know we've invested in it, but I've literally met people that will let a spouse or a relative go before they'll let that project go, right? And so getting that, learning and putting the rules in place and the stage gates in place up front. Put it up front and say, hey, these are what the stage gates are. Here's what success are. When will we call it? What needs to be true by this point, or we're just going to put it away for the time being. And there are projects that we let go on too long because we didn't do that up front. And not only was it a net co-cost, there were opportunity cost, things we should have been working on, we could have been working on that we weren't. And that's I think, is people come in, the best advice I give them right now. Let's set that up front. Every project, let's set the stage gates and understand it now. So when the time comes, we're going to call it, right? We're going to put emotion aside. We've already made the agreement. And unless something's changed, that's what we're going to do.
Yeah. I totally agree with that, because I think what I want to add on top of that is because I think voice agent, despite that there's we have made a lot of progress there, technically, the technology still has a lot to go, to be honest. And I think if you've done it right, it's completely possible to actually solve your problem already. But it's very likely that you are going to end up spending a lot of resources and not going anywhere. So because of that, setting up those milestones are very important. Also, finding a partner that are willing to actually go really deep and really far with you is very important as well. That's why there's a lot of startups out there doing FDE models. We are also doing that as well. And if they are doing the FDE models, try them out. Let them build things for you. Maybe it's actually it's a cheaper way for you to actually experiment. And there's a lot of competition now in voice agent companies. So you can negotiate the deals, good for you, and then just give it a try. And I think that is probably a way that you should go as well, rather than also thinking about putting all these big technology boxes together, because that's actually a lot you have to do as well. So find a cheaper way to expedite deployment, and finding a partner that you can lean on and trust to work on, I think would be my suggestion.
My advice is from an engineering perspective, and I think it's not just for voice AI. For any project that you start working on, it's always good to start small. Like you can think of building something piece by piece, like putting the Lego pieces together, making sure that you stay flexible on the way. Like you have a feature or a product you want to build. You want to try and have a proof of concept built, and you start really small. You use whatever resources you have, APIs, open source, whatever you think is best. You start with that, and then once you get some validation, you start building on top of it. Like you have some components there. Okay, earlier I used a third party or a vendor. Maybe the latency is not that great. You swap it out. You put a different piece on, and then brick by brick, piece by piece, you start building it, and then you get to a place where the product is very flexible. Because, like Sean said, the technology that we have these days, every day there's like a new model coming out, and you want to make sure, if you want to stay relevant and make sure the model is performing at its best, you want to make sure that you're leaning in, you're making sure that you're using the best out there, and having them build piece by piece really make sure that you stay flexible and you can adapt to changes quickly as possible.
Great. Sean, Cam, Prem, thank you so much for spending time with us today. We hope you all found today's session interesting and learned something new as you go on your voice journey. And Amazon, obviously, thank you for having us here today.